And then my dad yells out, "That ain't nothing but some dookie stick." And me, my brother, and sister fall out in laughter, talking about, "What the hell are you talking about, Dad? Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's a song. That's a song, Dookie Stick." And we laughed, right? But then I did a little bit of research, and there was a song called Dookie Stick in the 70s that was a hit, and it was literally the sample that Little John took. Once again, it was something that I wasn't familiar with. I was ignorant of it, and my dad introduced me to it. I told those stories to say, when I learned that the music that I was listening to was a remix and a sample of older music, I didn't decide to turn my eye at it just because my favorite artist had borrowed something and made it their own. I said, "Oh, okay, well, they took something and they remixed it and made it their own, but originally it was this." And I acknowledge that as a 12-year-old kid, as a 24-year-old young man. I acknowledge these things. So, for all those people that said there's no way in hell that Black people created country music, the information that I'm about to give you right now will fully prove that Black people created country music. And despite the fact that it is dominated by white people as of right now, that the Country Music Awards is almost as big as the Grammys, and that white people identity is tied up in the country music, that does not mean that one still can't enjoy country music just because you're not the creator of it. And it's not exactly the same, but country music, as we listen to it right now, as Beyoncé drops albums, is an evolution of music that was started by Black people. And one of the first things that I could do to point this out is by introducing a simple instrument called the banjo. Now, the banjo is a key instrument in country music. And guess where it originated from? It originated in Africa. It was brought to America by enslaved Africans and became a central part of slave music and culture in the South. The instrument was later standardized, appropriated, and spread to white audiences through minstrel shows and blackface shows. Now, we've had the conversation about what's minstrel and blackface, right? I told y'all the story of Uncle Tom, the book, The Uncle Tom, and how the character Uncle Tom is actually this really great hero that became bastardized because the South didn't want this Black man to be a hero, and then changed it so the character became this minstrel blackface, which is essentially making fun of Black people, making the Uncle Tom character stupid and a buffoon, to which now we look at the term Uncle Tom as something negative. It was not that. In the original incarnation of Uncle Tom, it was positive. So here we have the banjo, and it's a major instrument in this music that is being created, which is the genesis of country music, and it became bastardized once again through minstrel and blackface shows. It also, this form of music also hugely informed, quote unquote, what is called hillbilly music. And the hillbilly music was later rebranded as country music. So you see the evolution. The banjo is introduced. The banjo is used in a lot of African music and customs and rhythms and songs. This is the introduction of country music. The evolution of it becomes hillbilly music and then rebranded as country music. But I'm not done. I'm not done. Many of the songs of what early quote unquote hillbilly artists played inherited and adapted Black sources like slave spirituals, field songs, religious hymns, or quite simply just works from professional Black song writers. Yeah. So once again, we go from hillbilly music to later being rebranded as country music. The original quote unquote hillbilly music was all themes from Black culture, Black Southern culture. Okay. So let's talk a little bit about hillbilly music. So they use certain techniques like call and response and blurring of the note, which are essential in African music traditions and later became prominent in country music. But hillbilly music specifically is also known as country music or Appalachian music. And I told you guys a couple of shows back about the Melungeons who come from Appalachia, which were a combination of Black people, Native Americans, indigenous folks, and poor white people that came together in the Appalachian Mountains and created this entirely different community from anything else, right? Once again, borrowing on the African customs that's been spread out throughout the South. All right. We've already talked about the banjos, but some of the themes in hillbilly music. Now we're going from gone are the days of the minstrel shows and the blackface, and we're fully steeped in hillbilly music. But once again, is a direct descendant of African music using the banjo because you're still using the banjo in hillbilly music, all right? And hillbilly music is a negative term. I'm using it, like I said, when I said quote unquote, I'm using it specifically to make a point here because there's a genesis of a rebranding of what was then known as hillbilly music that is now rebranded as country music. It all comes from the same name, for same thing. The name just changed, right? Okay. So some of the themes in hillbilly music often reflects the experiences and values of people living in rural areas, is known for its down to earth and homey appeal. Does that not sound like country music to you? And I understand rural areas now, especially in the flyover states, are predominantly dominated by white people. Black people have always been in rural areas. And a lot of these rural customs that are in these flyover states still originated from the South and still were influenced by African culture. All right. So that's the evolution of what was hillbilly music and how it evolved and influenced other genres, but more specifically, what is now known as modern country music. So I can't draw any clearer picture of how we go from Black people created this music, it evolved over hundreds of years to become what is now known as country music. And we're seeing a lot of this when I talk about the Black facts. Like we talk about the inventor, Marie Brown, of the home security system. The inventor of the Ring camera gets the majority of the credit because he took something that was already created and connected it through Wi-Fi, right? But he is not the originator of home security. But if I told you it's a Black woman that actually created that, you'd be like, "Well, how? How in the world did she create that?" One, we're really inventive people, always have been. And two, the reason why we get overshadowed is because people are trying to take away the history. I'm not going to get into my deep dive about how there's a connection of what's going on right now with book banning, trying to take away DEI, trying to take away African American history and history, and not teach it to the kids because some kids feel guilty. I'm not going to go into all of that, but a little bit I am, because when you do those type of things, you miss out on the truth of the evolution of how things became what they are today. And this was just an example of how country music was literally started by Black people going all the way back to Africa and the banjo. But despite the deep roots and contributions of Black artists like Leslie Riddle and T. Tote Payne, who actually taught Hank Williams, without the contributions of these people, without the recognizing the contributions and the commercial decisions by white industry executive led to basically the exclusion of Black history in country music. It becomes very difficult to sell something to the white audiences if they realize that they are not the ones who actually created it. There was a whole film genre that saved the music industry, saved the movie industry, and they were blaxploitation films. It all started with Sweet Sweetback's Badass Song, and then later with movies like Shaft, Superfly, and The Mac, where movie studios realized, oh, there's a huge untapped market of consumers. They're Black people. We've never made movies for Black people. And movie studios were going out of business in the 70s. The whole movie industry was going to collapse until they tapped into this market. And they realized that Black audiences want movies that they can identify with. They made movies that Black audience can identify with. If you like that clip, go ahead and hit that like button. Don't forget to subscribe to catch up on all of our latest content. Don't forget to hit the notification button when you do subscribe so you can get updated every time we release content. We release content every day, whether it's an actual show or clips from the shows. So go ahead and subscribe, like, comment. Also, don't forget our Patreon page where you can find our Talking Straight-ish and After Hours Uncensored episodes. That's patreon.com/Unsolicited Perspectives. But once again, thank you again for listening to Unsolicited Perspectives. I'm your host, Bruce Anthony, and I'm going to catch you next time. I'll holla.